So I'm back with these guys again, and today they're going to educate us about radiometric dating. But first they feel the need to start off with a skit. It's pretty ridiculous, so I'll spare you from it. But here's the gist. The guy is in wrestling, and he weighs himself, and he weighs too much, and it's a big deal. That's pretty much it. Until the girl finds out what they're studying today, which is radiometric dating, and she has a bad reaction to it. She is genuinely disgusted by it, as if it triggers something in her, as if she's seen something.
Yeah. Radiometric dating.
Jane?
Oh.
Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! حي النزهة! Allahu Akbar! حمص تحترق!
But whatever, let's get into it.
I've noticed this is one of the most heated battles, this whole dating issue.
Actually, it's not really a battle at all. The closest thing we have to a battle is creationists getting mad because it doesn't affirm their preconceived notion that everything was created by a magic man in the sky.
Well, that's because time is at the foundation for everything evolutionary theory teaches.
Creationists love to do this. They love to say if we prove this wrong, then that disproves everything that these guys believe. The age of the Earth is the foundation of evolutionary thought. Abiogenesis is the foundation of evolutionary thought. Macroevolution is the foundation of evolutionary thought. Maybe we have evolutionary thought because all of these things are consistent with one another.
Look, just read this section right here.
Evolution takes a long time. If life has evolved, then Earth must be very fat.
Old. Yeah, it says old.
Radiometric dating is used to support the belief that millions of years exist for evolution to happen.
Yep, and like they said, the entire age of the Earth rests upon radiometric dating. It sure seems that they're putting a lot of faith in something that they can't actually test through direct observation.
Actually, we can and have tested it through direct observation. We can directly observe how radioactive isotopes decay, and we can determine that they decay in a constant, measurable, and predictable way. Radiometric dating is based on things that we can observe. It is actual science.
After all, plenty of assumptions go into these calculations.
Yes, but there are assumptions in anything that you do in science. We didn't just come up with these assumptions out of nowhere. All of these assumptions are founded. Oh, and by the way, if it seems like I'm cutting the video too early, as if I'm cutting off the last bit of the last word, that's because that actually happens in the video. I'm not just terrible at editing.
If it were to be disproved, their whole worldview would seem to collapse. Without billions of years, you can't have biological evolution or geological evolution on Earth.
Pretty epic, eh?
Actually, if the Earth was young, we would still have biological and geological evolution. We just wouldn't have it on the huge scale that we actually do see in the world today.
So, based on their dating methods, they've come up with an age for each section of the geologic column that we find on the very next page.
And based on that, they determine the age of the Earth to be about 4.5 billion years old.
Actually, the age of the Earth is based on the dating of certain meteorites.
They assume these meteorites formed at the same time as the Earth and that dating the meteorites will give us the age of the Earth.
Well, yes, but not quite. Dating meteorites doesn't necessarily date the age of the Earth. It's actually meant to give a date of the origin of the solar system, which is a bit of an upper limit of how old the Earth can be. But those ages are consistent with the ages of the oldest known terrestrial and lunar samples, which means the Earth and Moon. So we don't just use meteorites. From now on in this video, I'm going to start using Wikipedia a lot. This is for two reasons. One, to show how easy it is to fact check the things that they say, and two, because Wikipedia is reliable and unbiased. If you don't believe me, then think about this. Wikipedia cites its sources. All you have to do is hover over one of these numbers, you don't even have to click, and it'll tell you exactly where the information came from.
With that as a start, they then construct the ages of the layers in the column based primarily on the layers of volcanic ash and igneous rock.
Actually, we do date the strata, and we also use the dating of fossils found within the strata as a reference. And most strata are in sedimentary rock around rivers.
Cookie, I'm not gonna be...
Thanks. Wow, so they don't even rock.
Wow, you can't be serious. Do you think that somebody watching your video genuinely wants to see you talk with your mouth full? You know what? Hold on. Is this funny? Is this entertaining? Is this riveting content?
Wow, so they don't even use rock from Earth.
I guess there's another assumption you don't hear about in class.
You don't hear about it in class because that's a bunch of bull. They do use the dating of rocks from Earth, and it is consistent with meteorites as well as lunar samples, and even comparing the mass and luminosity of the sun in comparison to other stars.
So, for the test, could you remind me about how radiometric dating works?
He goes on to explain radiometric dating, which I feel like I can do a little bit better. So here's my explanation. There are certain atoms and isotopes that are radioactive, meaning the nucleus is too big to stay the way that it is. So eventually it breaks off a little bit of itself to become two daughter isotopes. Now oftentimes the big daughter isotope is still radioactive, and that will continue to decay until it reaches something that is stable. All of this decaying happens at a constant, predictable, exponential rate. So knowing that, if we find a substance with radioactive material in it, then we can look at the amount of parent and daughter isotopes in it, as well as environmental factors that may take away or add parent or daughter material. I imagine that environmental factor caveat is going to be an issue later on.
So, what's wrong with this method?
Well, the methods measure only the amounts of isotopes in the rock. This is good science because it is observable and repeatable.
I love how creationists of all people can tell us what good science is, as if they use good science.
It just gives the ratio of one element to another. But the age is an interpretation of those measurements, not an observation.
Oh, I see. We're just applying the knowledge that we have. I see. I didn't realize that was wrong.
And that interpretation assumes answers to all kinds of untested questions. What if the rock already had a daughter isotope in it from the very beginning?
That is definitely something that we do take into account.
Or what if the rock gets contaminated?
Yeah, see what I mean? He completely glances over the fact that we actually do take into account environmental factors.
Or what if the rate of decay was rattled at some point in the past?
It's unreasonable to think that such a thing would happen. Yes, this is an assumption that they make, but it is a completely founded assumption. In fact, it would be a bigger assumption to assume that it was different at any point in time.
One must assume no parent or daughter material was added or removed from the rock.
No, we don't assume that. We actually take that into account.
And that the rate of decay has always been constant over millions and millions of years.
And I'd like to hear a reason as to why we shouldn't.
Are those assumptions wrong? I mean, if you start with false assumptions, you could get really bad dates.
Right, like if you make the assumption that the Bible is true, you could think that the Earth is thousands of years old, and that's just crazy.
To be fair, there are lots of dates that agree with one another, but there are many examples of different mineral components of a rock giving very different radiometric dates, and very often, different isotope systems give different ages for the same rock.
I think what you mean to say is that the vast majority of dates agree with one another, but every now and then there will be one that is somehow off. And in those instances, we can actually figure out why.
And then there are rocks we know the age of, where we watched it cool from lava, that give radically older dates.
Really?
Yeah.
A lava flow in a volcano of the North Island of New Zealand that happened in 1954 was dated to be 3.5 million years old.
I'd like to point out that the article that they're citing is from the Institute for Creation Research, which, as you can tell by the name, is a completely 100% scientific, unbiased source that knows exactly what it's talking about, as is evidenced by the fact that it misspelled Achilles. You couldn't even look that up. I'll get to the point after this.
Wow, that's really off.
A volcanic bomb that blew out of Mount Stromboli in Italy in 1963 was dated to 2.4 million years old.
And that dated much older than it really was.
A 10-year-old rock from Mount St. Helens lava dome dated to 350,000 years and older.
And all of these things are mentioned in the article that they source. See, what happened is that the argon in the rocks was supposed to escape after it melted, but excess argon still left in the lava caused the dates to be older than they are. But if you look at an actual scientific source like this one here, you find out that we know, and that we now have ways of adjusting for that. We take those things into consideration, and you need to determine if a sample has reached its closure temperature, which, as it turns out, is something that is mentioned in Wikipedia. And if we do see dates that are crazy like this, we generally discard them. We don't use dates that are obviously wrong.
If we can't trust radiometric dating on rocks that we can see formed, then how can we trust radiometric dating on rocks that we can see formed? Rocks that supposedly formed a million years ago.
I know, right?
I can tell that this gotcha evolutionists thing is going to be a bit of a motif. But here's the thing. You need to date the things correctly, and we know how to do that.
And there are so many other examples. Check this out. Okay.
What's this? You carry rocks in your backpack while you're jogging?
Hey, hardcore. Okay, this rock was taken from the Ono Formation near Redding, California, where millions of sea fossils have been found.
I'd like to point out that the article that is sourced comes from the Answers Research Journal from Answers in Genesis. So obviously a completely 100% scientific, unbiased source with absolutely no agenda.
This lower Cretaceous rock is supposed to be about 112 million years old, but the marine fossil stuck inside the mud rock, an ammonite, showed 36,000 radiocarbon years.
How can a rock be 112 million years old if it holds a fossil of only 36,000 years using a different method?
I wonder if either date is meaningful.
Well, here's the thing. In this particular study, if you can even call it that, the rocks around the fossils weren't actually dated in any way. Here's how this happened. A creation scientist went on a field trip with a Baptist church pastor, and apparently they looked at all the strata and meticulously found which one was the Cretaceous one, and found the fossils from there. But if you look at the pictures from where they found it, it kind of just looks like they're lying around. Not only that, there are several problems with dating shells in general. There are several environmental factors that need to be taken into account that simply weren't in this case. There's the reservoir effect, recrystallization, and how easy it is to contaminate calcium carbonate, which shells are made of. Even exposure to carbon dioxide in the air is enough to make it seem younger than it really is. All of these things make shells one of the least effective materials to carbon date. Now, to be fair, they do take contamination into account, and preparations were made because of it, as is standard procedure when carbon dating things. But nothing else was. And that's because these guys are creation scientists, so they didn't really know what they were doing. But actual scientists do, and they do account for these critical environmental factors. So what you have are pseudoscientists doing things incorrectly, and then acting like they trump people who know what they're doing. And then there's these guys who feel like they're educating the world about it.
Seems kinda suspicious to me. The evidence isn't seeming too rock solid.
Funny. Let me see your diamond ring.
You mean my purity ring?
No, your ring of pretension.
Researchers find carbon-14 in diamonds.
Why is that important?
Radiocarbon decays quickly. It has a half-life of only about 5,730 years. So its maximum shelf life is only about 100,000 years before it becomes undetectable.
Well, where did that radiocarbon come from? No, seriously, because radiocarbon can be spontaneously formed inside of diamonds. When a diamond contains carbon and nitrogen, which diamonds virtually always do, and it is near a source of radiation, it can and does spontaneously form radiocarbon. Not only that, but there's an issue of contamination. They like to say that they took preparations to account for contamination, but the fact of the matter is that it hardly takes any contamination at all to ruin a sample of near zero radiocarbon. But they also like to say that diamonds simply can't be contaminated.
And it might be impossible to contaminate an old diamond with young carbon.
Which is a flat-out lie.
Wow, so those diamonds must be younger than they think.
So here's the real question. Why are any of these examples in our textbook?
Because these things weren't actually conducted by scientists. They were conducted by people whose sole purpose it was to jack off into the Bible.
Well, I should get back to working out and... What? This scale is reading an extra 15 pounds on it.
What? This scale is evil!
Calm down. It just wasn't calibrated, okay? See?
Okay.
All right, 229. Safe. Hey, that's kind of like radiometric dating. Maybe everyone's been trusting that it's accurate, but it's been giving them false numbers.
Well, not really. See, it is like radiometric dating, but not in that way. See, there's a proper way to use it, but idiots like you can't seem to figure it out.
So we trust God's word instead of man's fallible dating methods.
Again, close but not really. You trust the words of ancient desert people who claim to have heard from God himself, instead of following modern scientific consensus, which holds up to and welcomes reasonable criticism.
Kind of makes you think, doesn't it?
Yes, I am still thinking.